These three limbs in relation to the other limbs are inward, but they are external in relation to the unconditioned aspect of samadhi. Book 3 is very much concerned with Samyama. Samyama is one of these words which is probably better not to translate, because there isn't any English translation which is meaningful. So a word like karma or samadhi or nirvana, we have to come to our own understanding of what it means. Now here in the Yoga Sutras, Samyama is a combination of the last three limbs of yoga. And the last three limbs were to do with concentration, meditation and samadhi. And these three things, these three factors are integrated into the one factor, Samyama. It's about being focused in pure awareness, being absorbed in pure awareness. This happens when we're not taken in by the cognitive process. Now, what does Patanjali mean about them being inward, internal and external? And why is he mentioning this? Why is he bothering to mention it? Why is he bothering to mention that these three factors are internal or inward, and that they're external in relation to the unconditioned? Well, let's look in some detail at Samyama again. I've mentioned in previous sutras the Buddha's enlightenment, how after practicing austerities for many years, after practicing many techniques, he gave up and sat under the tree, sat under the Bodhi tree. And what came to mind was an experience he had as a teenager. And that experience is what the Buddhists would call the first jhana, the first stage of meditative absorption. And the Buddha saw no need to go beyond this. He saw this as the way to enlightenment. And what characterizes this first jhana is the ability to have discursive thought. You're using your mind. I mentioned in the previous video about the association of Samyama with acquiring supernormal powers, and how this involves notions of control, which is completely at odds with yogic understanding. On the other hand, the yogi is no longer controlled. The yogi is no longer controlled by the mind. This is the final freedom, which we're leading up to in Book 4. So we can use the mind. Why not? At this point, we're no longer being controlled by the mind. This is the essence of Samyama. And the word Samyama is made up of two parts, Sam and Yama. Yama we've already met. This is actually the first limb of the 8 limbs of yoga. This is about not indulging the mind. And Sam means completely, wholly, or perfectly. So Samyama is really the culmination of Yama, the first limb of yoga. It's a state of meditative contemplation by which we can dismantle all the cognitive structures that we adhere to and which are obscuring our full enlightenment. So Samyama is the perfection of Yama. This is reinforced by the second limb, which is concerned with appropriate attitudes. In other words, we're developing the correct attitudes to reinforce our non-self-indulgence, to subvert the indulging of the mind. We consider our composure and our breathing as a way of checking the quality of our samyama. And we're no longer caught up in the consensus reality, which consists of a world of objects, of inner objects, thoughts and ideas and concepts and beliefs and so on, and an outer world of physical objects and individual entities. So we remove ourselves from consensus reality and we continue with Samyama, the final three limbs. So, the three limbs in relation to the other limbs are inward. This is because we're no longer concerned with consensus reality. We're reinforcing our own sense of being, and we're removing the cognitive structures which we believe to be real and which we are still adhering to. These are notions, for example, of an individual and of a world, and of some connection between these two completely disparate entities. So this is an inner process. It's a process which is establishing ourselves in our own sense of being, rather than in the reality that we've been educated to believe in. So in that sense, it's inner. So the point of this sutra, Sutra 7, is to be quite clear about this. We are withdrawing our emotional investment in the world out there and bringing it back to our own sense of being, to our own samadhi, establishment in the true nature of consciousness. But this work of samyama is external in relation to samadhi. It's rather like how samadhi is sometimes described as being with seed and without seed. Samadhi is an absolute state. But in order to realize that, in order to realize samadhi, there's a certain effort. Initial samadhi is spontaneous, but there's an effort in becoming established in it. Fundamentally, there's only samadhi. This is the reality. This is the reality which, through the process of samyama, we become more and more attuned to.